Hello everyone, my name is Edwin Rodriguez and today I'm going to talk about L1 and L2 language acquisition. So, if you are ready, let's begin. First of all, we have to know what a language is. And for this, and to answer this question, to answer what is a language, today we got two definitions of it. The first one says, language is the medium by which we convey messages. Pretty simple, but accurate. The second definition says, the principal method of human communication consisting of words used in a structured and conventional way and conveyed by speech, writing, or gestures. Well, these were the two definitions of language. We can also say, or we can define language as the way we use to transmit or convey our thoughts, ideas, or messages through speech, writing, or gestures. Now, let's move on. And here we got two questions. The first one says, what is L1? And L1 is our first language, our native language, or our mother tongue. It means that L1, the term L1 refers to the first language we acquire. And what about L2? What is L2? Well, L2 is a second language, a foreign language, a language that is acquired after the first language. So when we talk about L2, we are referring to the language we learn after have learned our first language. In other words, L2 is the second language we acquire. L1. First languages are generally maintained for life, with little overt effort on the part of the speaker. L1, or the first language, is acquired effortlessly and naturally. And this is because first languages are often woven into personal and socio-cultural identities of the native speaker. The process of acquiring L1 is known as first language acquisition, or FLA. This is a complex biological process which is still not yet entirely understood by the scientific community. So, about L1, we can say that getting this L1, getting the language, getting our mother tongue is easy because we learn it naturally without any effort, without any pressure, just it happens, just we learn it. And well, the process of this first language acquisition can be also called FLA. The process of language acquisition, FLA, has some basic requirements. During the first 2 or 3 years of development, a child requires interaction with other language users in order to bring the general language capacity into contact with a particular language, such as English. Well, So the process of language acquisition needs some basic requirements, and these are interaction, interaction with the speakers, also need time to get the capacity to contact with a particular language. Now let's move on. Now we got some characteristics of L1. First, L1s are acquired automatically without conscious effort. And it is what I said before. We learn the mother tongue without any effort, without any pressure, just we learn it. Second characteristic, L1s are learned before puberty, typically during infancy. Well, that is a fact. We learn the language when we are children, so that's it. Then we got the third characteristic, and acquired L1 is known as native proficiency. So if we get the L1, we can be also called that native proficiency. The other characteristic says appropriate use of idiomatic expressions. Well, if we learn the language since we are 1 years old or 2 years old, we for sure will learn the correct idiomatic expressions. The next characteristic says correctness of language form. Well, if we know the language, we know how to use it correctly. Natural pronunciation, and finally, we have the last characteristic, non-version, not verbal cultural features. L2, second language can refer to any language, also a third or fourth language, learned in addition to the native language. However, second language learning would be contrast with a bilingual learning situation in which a child acquires two languages simultaneously. Example, when the parents speak two different languages. We only speak of second language acquisition if another language is acquired after the first language. So it means that if we learn two languages simultaneously, it is not called second language because this both won't be a foreign language, won't be the process called second language acquisition. So if we are in a process of L2, acquisition will be when we learn a language after learned others. I mean, if you can speak English and French and you learn them simultaneously, you're not in a second language process. But if you learn German or you are learning German, you are in a second language process. So, in short, L2 or second language refers to the language you acquire or learn after learning your mother tongue. In contrast to L1, acquiring the second language, L2 tends to give learners some struggles when learning. L2s are learned through a process known as second language acquisition. Well, the process of L2 is called SLA. Now let's move on. And here we got L2 characteristics. First, second language acquisition is the process of acquiring language capacity after another language or languages have already been learned native. It is what I said before. L2 is learned after getting acquired of a language or two languages simultaneously. Learning an L2 requires conscious effort. Well, it is needed a little effort to learn a second language because we don't learn it naturally. L2s are not learned during infancy and most often after puberty. Well, that is a fact. When we are children, we tend to learn our mother tongue, but we are not interested in learning other language. So for this, we usually, or the people that want to learn a language usually do it when they are between 16 years or more. So in the puberty or when they get older. The next characteristic, well, theoretically an acquired L2 can only be known and non-native proficiencies. Well, in case you learn an L2, you will be known as non-native proficiency. Through capacity in both L1 and L2s can be deteriorated from lack of use through a process called attrition. L2 capacity is considered to decrease faster from issues than their L1 counterparts. But it is a fact that if we learn a language and we start using it, we will tend to forget the first one. But if we use our L1, we are risking to start forgetting our L2. And as the last statement says, it considered that the L2 decreases faster. Now we got some facts about first and second language acquisition. The level of competence acquired with SLA, second language acquisition, depends not so much on the time spent learning a language as the time at which one begins. So getting acquired of L2 doesn't depend just on the time you spend, but the time you begin. In general, linguistics maintain that a first language is acquired unconsciously, and that a second language is learned by conscious study of the second language structure. There is a critical period, that of puberty, around 12 or 13 years of age, after which it's difficult, if not possible, to acquire a second language with the same degree of competence as the first language. SLA is very largely conscious and depends on factors such as motivation and personality. This doesn't apply to FLA, first language acquisition, which is triggered by birth. Well, some of these facts are really pretty interesting. And the third statement says that if you don't get the language around 12 or 13 years old or less, you could it will be a little more difficult to express yourself, to express your competence as your mother tongue. And the last statement says that SLA is very largest conscious and depends on factors as motivation and personality. Well, the second language acquisition is not an easy thing to do, and to get the L2, the one who wants to achieve it has to have a great motivation and personality to reach its goal. Now, let's see some similarities between L1 and L2. In both first and second language acquisition, the learner uses context, prior knowledge, and interaction to comprehend the language. In both first and second language acquisition, age is an important variable affecting proficiency. Third, in both first and second language acquisition, learners can often comprehend more complex language than they are able to produce in their initial stages of learning. Learners go through a silent period. Here we got more similarities between L1 and L2. In both first and second language acquisition, a learner's proficiency can vary across situations. Next, in both, learners may overgeneralize vocabulary or rules, using them in contexts broader than those in which they should be used. Last one, in both first and second language acquisition, learners need to comprehend input and opportunities to learn language in context in order to increase their proficiency. Now we have the chart with some differences between L1 and L2. The first one says L1, age starts from birth. Well, as we know that we start learning the language or our mother tongue since we get born. In contrast, L2 is learned in primary school or college. Well, that is true because just as an example, here in our country, we start learning the English language since or when we get to high school or primary school, not before. Then we have other difference. It says learns as their cognition develops. Whereas L2 might have developed cognitive skills. Now we have other differences. Intrinsic motivation needs the language. On the other side, L2 past learning experience might affect. Well, it is known that when we are children and we are learning our mother tongue, there's an intrinsic motivation. So it makes easier to get the language. On the other hand, learning the second language is a little bit harder because we need to dedicate some time and give our best to get it. And as the difference says, past learning experience might affect. Well, if we sometimes when we got some bad experience, it could affect us in order to learn the language. Now we have the next differences. L1 is learned through exposure by picking it up with strong motivation and interacting, going through a silent period. Well, it is said that we learn our mother tongue by the exposure to the language, by putting it into practice, and with the motivation to understand and express, to understand the others and express our ideas. In contrast, L2 sometimes through is learned, sometimes through exposure with little or no motivation, interacting with the teacher, often in controlled practice activities. Well, as we know, learning the L2 or the foreign language is a little bit harder because we don't get it naturally. We sometimes are boring or dismotivated, but we have to learn it, and sometimes we are pressured to get it. The next differences say L1 it is the primary stage language. Meanwhile, L2 is the next step after acquiring the primary language. Finally, L1 it is a natural learning way. But on the other hand, in the other hand, L2, we can say that we learn the language naturally. We cannot say it is natural. And here we got some series of L1 and L2, and these are called behaviorism, nativism or innateness theory, and Stephen Krashe's series. And well, these series let's start explaining them. Let's start with the behaviorism. The behaviorism suggests that infants learn oral language from other human role models through a process involving imitation, rewards, and practice. While nativism or innateness theory suggests that children's brains are programmed to learn the language. And it is important to know that while children seem to have the ability to acquire the language easily, adults acquiring a second language find it a much more difficult process. Now let's move on to the L2 theory, the theory of Stephen Krashen's. And this theory suggests that language acquisition doesn't require extensive use of conscious grammatical rules and doesn't require tedious drill. Acquisition requires meaningful interaction in the target language, natural communication in which speakers are concerned not with the form of their utterance, but with the message they are conveying and understanding. And as a final thought or final thoughts, I gotta say that first language acquisition is a natural process of getting the capacity to use human language, where previously no such capacities exist. L1 are acquired automatically and without conscious effort. L1 are almost always learned during infancy. On the other hand, L2 is a complex process of acquiring language capacity after another language or languages that have already been learned natively. For the best second language attainment, it seems that too beneficial to be culturally involved in the target language. So, I can say that the first language acquisition is easier than getting the second language acquisition. And it is because we learn it automatically and without any effort. And as I said, or as I, or it is said in the paragraph, almost everybody learn the mother tongue during infancy. But L2 is a more complex process of acquiring a language, and it is because it is difficult to be in constant contact with the language. And so, as said at the beginning or in the middle, L2 refers to the capacity that acquire a second language after have already learned the mother tongue or two languages instantly. I mean simultaneously. And to learn the second language to be attainment could be crucial to acquire the language faster. So this was all for today. I hope you understood. See ya. Thanks.